Hello everyone, Luciano Oliveira, Oliveira Lawyers. Today is Wednesday, August the 19th, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. We are starting one more live stream, and if you're here with us, you have a priority to choose topics of your interest to be discussed live. If you have questions, I'm gonna do my best to try to answer them. I may not get into details about your case because otherwise there would be like a consultation, and we are forbidden by the Brazilian Bar Association to have like public consultations in a live stream. All right, I hope it makes sense. But if you're here with us, send me a hi in our chat window so I know you can see me, you can hear me, and we can proceed. All right, so far nobody on the chat window. Let's see if we get any messages. Yay, Aaron, thank you, Aaron. We can see and hear you. Good to have you, Aaron. We have MED Motorcycles. How's it going, MED? We have Christopher Costa. Nice to have you over here. So yes, folks, if you have any topics of your interest, let me know and we can discuss live. And in the meantime, we're gonna take a look. We're gonna take a look at the news. And this is Estadão. Estadão is a major Brazilian newspaper. The main headline is talking about the next administration, right? So we are on track for presidential elections in Brazil, and they're talking about amendments to the Brazilian Constitution to allow more investment in infrastructure. And now I'm just going to make a couple of comments about the Brazilian Constitution. Just for those of you who don't know, our Constitution is very different from the U.S. Constitution, for instance. The U.S. Constitution is super short, is more about principles. The Brazilian Constitution, it also has many principles, but it goes beyond that. It actually gets into articles, and therefore is like substantially longer. And like an upside is that it's gonna kind of address pretty much any topic that you can think of from a constitutional perspective. The downside is that because so much is written, as society evolves, there is always going to be some conflict about that moment in time, and the original expectation for how those topics should be addressed. So amendments to the Brazilian Constitution, they're kind of frequent, which again is very different from what you see for the U.S. Constitution and many other constitutions. So there you go. This one is one, this headline is related to something that I always address over here. If you think about, I don't know, the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, right? You would never see a major headline like occupying, I don't know, like probably 1/5 of the front page about bodybuilding. But very often you're gonna actually see this type of topic because from the Brazilian, cultural or society perspective, sports and fitness and even your personal image has a much higher priority in our society than what you would probably find. And of course, I'm kind of generalizing, but potentially when you compare to the United States and some European countries, right? Like Brazilians, they're very self-conscious, and Brazil, I don't know how it is nowadays, but for a long time, Brazil has been one of the countries with the highest rate of plastic surgery everywhere. All right, so this is like the headline, and this one is an interesting topic. I'm sure all of you have heard about before. But like bodybuilding is not only good for your body, but particularly for your brain. And that's the whole point of this article over here. And let's see what else we have. This one is another one that, is mind blowing to me. Unfortunately, given the current economic challenges in Brazil, many retailers, they are facing severe challenges. And this one here, Casas Bahia, if you've been in Brazil or if you are in Brazil, you probably heard about Casas Bahia. It's a major retailer. You're gonna find, like street stores. You're gonna find stores at the mall. You're gonna find like Casas Bahia on the internet and so on. And they are having a very hard time, right? Because of the economic challenges. There are many challenges we going through as we speak. And not only because of, tariffs like from the United States, but I would say, like our management could have been better, if you will. And several, it's not just like Casas Bahia, we have several retailers who are on track to bankruptcy. And Casas Bahia, unfortunately, seems to be one of them. But the point I want to address over here is actually the second headline, which in my understanding, right, like the way things work in the US, Europe, and elsewhere, it is just bizarre. So Casas Bahia, because they are facing, challenges, they are closing stores. And guess what? They're closing stores. They're trying, to get their numbers in better shape. They're trying to survive. And guess what? This headline says, a court has ordered Casas Bahia to bring back employees that were let go. Right? So this is one of the most bizarre aspects of the Brazilian culture, society, and law, which is like a Brazilian labor law, which is basically the same thing we have since the 1930s or 1940s. And for some reason, culturally, it's very difficult for us to modernize the labor law framework. And this is the result of such archaic framework. So Casas Bahia is like, doing whatever they can to survive. And now closing the stores, they are naturally, right, like firing employees who were working for those stores, trying to, get a leaner, like, a more lean type of structure. And guess what? Now there is a court ordering them, listen, you cannot fire employees. That's not how things work in Brazil. You need to hire those folks back. Guess what's going to happen? I mean, I don't think you need to be a genius to find out what's going to happen to Casas Bahia. Okay, and unfortunately, very unfortunately, I think I may share this news with you. I don't know if a couple of months down the line or a bit further, but if that's how they are going to be, handled by the courts. Instead of saving like, I don't know, 10% or 15% of the workforce, you're going to have 100% of the workforce without work. So this is the Brazilian, labor law in action. That's, something very amusing to me. All right, let's see what else. Yeah, that's pretty much it for today. Let's not forget to talk a little bit about Remax Nomad States. Remax Nomad States is one of our partners for real estate in Brazil. If you are interested in getting like a short list or a realtor who communicates in clear English and can understand the needs of a foreign citizen, there you go. Take a screenshot. Get in touch with them and be happy. All right, let's go back to our live stream. and see what we have in our chat window. Let's see if there is something in the chat window already. Yes, we have MED Motorcycles. Hello, the housing market peaked in February 2022. We have been on a slow decline since. The housing market in the US seems frozen at the moment. Is there a similar trend in Brazil? I think so. I think so, MED. Is a very interesting question, and it's not uncommon for Brazil. Not uncommon for Brazil to kind of mirror what you see in the United States from so many perspectives, right? And maybe it shouldn't be that surprising because nowadays countries, they are, like interconnected. And from a cultural perspective, Brazil is always paying attention to what's going on in the United States, super common, right? And today was kind of an exception, but pretty much every single day you're gonna open a newspaper in Brazil, you're gonna see news from the United States, like on the first page, right? Given how important the United States is to Brazil from a cultural perspective. And from the economic perspective, like once you have like a slump in the United States, typically this is gonna reflect in Brazil as well. And nowadays, yes, we have like a kind of slow real estate market, which is more a buyer's market, just like what you see in the United States. Now, a distinction I would highlight is that in the U.S. you have like a broader kind of map of different realities, right? So whenever I'm reading the U.S. newspapers, I see like they're gonna say, listen, the Austin area in Texas, like they have lost 20 to 30% of the market prices that you would see, like I don't know, back in 2022, right? So if you take a look at the Austin market, if you look at the 2022 price levels and today price levels, they are about 20 or 30% less. But at the same time, you're going to look at other markets and they are going to be, like higher in terms of prices than they were in 2022. So you see like different dynamics in the US, right? Now, Brazil doesn't have such a broad pattern in Brazil because we don't have probably two coasts. We just have a single coast. It's more about, like this whole area by the coast that is going to behave more or less the same. Okay, this said, there are distinctions per area. For instance, like for the south area, including, São Paulo, Santa Catarina, and Rio Grande do Sul, these are consistently more desirable areas from an investment perspective. The south of Brazil is typically recognized as a safer area than the remaining states, right? So it's typically more desirable, but the whole market in Brazil, I think it tends to be more similar than what you see in the United States. But I would say, MD, like short, you're from Canada, right? All right, I just see here the message from Canada, but I guess Canada and the United States, they were kind of somewhat similar, right, in terms of market movements. And in Brazil, like there is less distinction among the areas in terms of market prices, if you will. Aaron, how do the previously 15% interest rates in Brazil, now closer to 14%, affect real estate valuation? Projections I've seen suggest it's going to go lower and buyers be able to pay more soon. Yes, Aaron. So, a 15% interest rate in Brazil, right? Particularly when you have like a mindset from someone from the United States, it does sound too much. But actually, Aaron, for us Brazilians, it's not, right? Like it's not. Like whenever you're gonna try to get money for other purposes, let's say, if you're gonna get a loan in a Brazilian bank, the rates are gonna be so much higher that I don't think the 14 or 15% is gonna scare a Brazilian buyer. Okay, maybe it's gonna scare a buyer from abroad, but not necessarily from Brazilian buyers. And I still remember, something that is not available to the memory of every single Brazilian. It's going to be available to older folks, granted. It's going to be like the hyperinflation reality we lived up to the 90s. So, like in the 80s, in the 90s, like when I went to college, believe it or not, like prices they would be changed a few times a week, right? Like I don't think they would do it daily, just because of the whole process of re-stamp the price tags to the products. But I still remember when I would go to college, you could never tell the price for something, because I think inflation was, I don't know anymore the exact numbers, but it could be like 100% or 200% a year, or even more, right? I don't know, 200% a year. So if you think about 200%, like in 12 months, like it means that things would be losing value pretty much every day, and nobody could ever tell the price of anything. It was just crazy, right? So you would take like a bulk of cash, and then just pay whatever they were charging at the given day. So like for people who are very active in real estate, which is my case, for instance, and other folks from older generations, whenever they look at 15%, they say, you know what, 15%, it's nothing when we compare to a good chunk of our lives, right? Like back up to the 90s. I would say, younger generations in Brazil, they are also not like scared away by 15%, because in theory, we never had anything better than that. Like we never had something similar to the US, in which rates were up to not so long ago, they were like what, like 2%, 3%, like for prime borrowers, right? Like it would be like 2%, 3%, 4%. And we never had such a thing in Brazil. So when we look at the 15, we say, well, if that's what we need to get in order to become an owner, right? Like a property owner, that's fine with me. Now, if the rates are reduced, right? If the rates are reduced, naturally, people are going to have even more capacity to buy and to finance real estate, and naturally this could increase prices a little bit, because then there is more demand. People are able to buy a broader range of properties, and therefore this could help a little bit with the price. But the interest rate as of today, in my opinion, it does not hurt the market as much as one would expect, given our past reality of like hyperinflation and really crazy interest rates, right? Like, I mean, back then it would be 200%, or I don't know, 300% a year. Okay, so like when you look at 15% and you still have those numbers in your memory, they don't sound bad at all. MD, really interesting take. MD says the US sneezes, the world catches a cold. That's true, MD. And, like the concern is like, just like you said, if there is a real recession, right? Like in the United States, like the Brazilian market, the Brazilian economy, which is not in great shape as we speak, it would get even worse. It would get even worse. So, at least from our perspective, from my perspective, I really wish the United States, Canada, and Europe and other countries, to succeed, because then Brazil as well has a better chance of succeeding. If the U.S. Enters a recession, naturally this is going to be really bad to Brazil. I agree 100%, MD. Aaron, do interest rates in Brazil influence prices like they do in Canada? Here, when rates drop from 5 to 3%, houses tend to increase based on the 20-year borrowing power that unlocks. Yes, Aaron. So, it looks like I already addressed this question. Listen, there should be some type of, influence, right? I just don't think it is as much as what you see nowadays in the United States. In the United States, it looks like because so many people were able to lock in a rate between 3 to 4%, sometimes 2.75%, 3%, 4%. Nowadays, you have a market that is constrained because, many homeowners, they don't want to sell, because if they sell and they buy something else, guess what? Instead of paying a 3% rate, now they're going to pay 7 or maybe even 8%. And homeowners, they don't want to, let go of that very exclusive deal. In Brazil, like I said, we never had such a thing, like 3 to 4% or even 5 or 6. So in Brazil, my memory is all right, I had 9% or 10%, and now it's 15. So what? Okay. Now you're right. If it is 15 and it drops to 12, there's gonna be a cheaper cost of borrowing money, and there should be some positive influence on the prices, in a sense that they would increase because now more people can afford a mortgage, and because more people can afford a mortgage and potentially higher prices, guess what? The real estate market is going to react in a way to kind of adjust to their reality. More buyers, more purchase power, and guess what? Prices would rise a little bit, if you will. Very interesting, Aaron. All right. Okay, so this is about a topic that is somewhat recurring here at the firm. It is. It goes like this. We have the Brazil digital nomad visa / residency. That's a very interesting track for those of you who want to test the waters. It is typically for 1 year, and the original legislation said for 1 year, renewable for a second year. So originally, this was intended for 2 years. I think ChatGPT still says 2 years. Okay, so very interesting. There is a bunch of things whenever you check in AI that does not meet reality. Okay, so yes, AI is gonna give you the correct answer, I would say, to the majority of questions, but it's not gonna give you the correct answer to everything. And therefore, if you are relying on AI, you may very well get incomplete or incorrect information, leading you to take a path that is not gonna be real. And this is one of those that I've been seeing more than once. Nowadays, the digital nomad, there is no regulation addressing what I say, and that's probably why ChatGPT can get this one right. But we have many clients who have been renewing for multiple times, 1 time, 2 times, and we have clients who are renewing their digital nomads for a 3rd time. Okay, so definitely, as of today, the digital nomad can be renewed on a daily basis. Now, if you're going to ask me how this is going to be 5 years from now, 4 years from now, 3 years from now, 2 years from now, I don't know. Nobody can foretell how immigration is going to be working in a few years from now. So what I can tell you is, as of today, the Brazil digital nomad visa is slash residency, right? More specifically about the residency, because you could get a visa abroad, or you could even get a residency being in Brazil. And after that, you're going to be renewing the residency. You're not going to be renewing the visa, because you're not going to go back to your country of origin. You can apply for a renewal while physically in Brazil. So again, we have clients who have renewed for 3 times successfully, all right? So that's the first important piece of information for you. The second one is about the business owner track, okay? The business owner track is a recurring topic we have in our consultations. And typically the person is going to say, well, I have a business, and can I apply for the digital nomad visa or not, right? And what I can tell you is that the Brazil digital nomad visa or residency, yes, it can accommodate a business owner as long as you have a flexible understanding of things. Because sometimes we see people who want to, have everything inside a box, and this doesn't typically work well for the digital nomads. What do I mean by that? I mean that the Brazilian federal police, which is the Brazilian immigration, whenever they are reviewing digital nomad applications in Brazil, right? And then we're going to talk about the distinction between applying in Brazil to applying abroad, okay? Very different, all right? But when you are applying in Brazil, the review of your application is going to be more consistent. Why? Because it's going to be a single department of analysts who are going to be operating under a single supervisor of this specific type of residency in Brazil. And therefore, the results and the review, they are going to be more consistent. Are they going to be exactly the same? No, they will not, because you have different people with different heads evaluating the applications, okay? But this said, it is way more consistent than when you apply abroad. When you apply abroad, the standards, they are all over the place. Consulates are very clear and specific that they have a discretion to interpret the requirements, and even more than that, they have a discretion to adapt the requirements to the specifics of the country in which they are sitting. And therefore, when we get to visa, all over the place. So for the purpose of my explanation, we're going to be talking here about the digital nomad application in Brazil, which is called residency, not a visa. Visas are applied abroad through a Brazilian consulate or embassy. When you apply in Brazil, we are always talking about residency. There are no visas typically issued in Brazil. So going back to the track of digital nomad business owner, I remember there was back in 2023, so a long time ago, we had like the original checklist for the application. And the checklist basically said, listen, you have, those requirements about income, which I think they're they're easier to understand. And they have basically a requirement for a letter of the employing company to be provided on the company's letterhead, signed by the responsible party for that company, attesting that the applicant was able and working remotely. So the person should be able and should be working remotely as well, right? Or able and allowed, authorized by the company to work remotely. There are very specific requirements for this letter, and that's something we make available as a template for those who are hiring our service, right? So we don't provide this template in our consultations, but for those who hire our service, we then provide this template so the person can give it to their employer, right? And so they don't need to guess what should be in such a letter. Now, going back to the business owner. So I remember back in 2023, there was an attorney who was our client. So he was an attorney in the US, and we said, listen, based on our understanding of the Brazilian immigration, the closer you get to the checklist they have, the easier it is going to be your approval. And therefore, even though like this attorney was the owner of the firm, we said, listen, we really advise you to basically just get like, a letter from your firm on your letterhead saying that your position is general manager, right? That's what you do. You are a general manager, like you make such amount of money, and this is going to be signed by the the head of human resources at your firm. And then we provide that. We're going to provide the other document on the financials, and you go. And guess what? He said, I'm not gonna do it. I am not an employee. I am a business owner, and that's how you're gonna apply on my behalf, right? And back then, it was like the digital nomad was approved back in 2022. So that was in 2023, like 1 year, like it was basically just, ramping up. And we said, all right, like, we understand, we get it. Like, your business owner, you don't want to show on the letter as an employee. And guess what? Like, we filed this application. It was with a consulate, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like, it was a long time ago. And they said, no, we don't recognize any of this paperwork, right? Like, he was providing articles of incorporation. He was providing operating agreement. He was providing for the firm was in the United States, right? So the EIN is the federal tax ID for the entity. So there was a bunch of things. And the consulate basically said, listen, those things, they mean zero to us. They are meaningless to us. What I need from you is a letter, from the employer. And notice that their language, even though we said very specifically that the client was the business owner, they were still going back to the checklist. So they said, we need a letter from the employer. The letter needs to meet the requirements, and it must be signed by the employer, right? So after, like this botched application, we never again tried to apply for anything, either at the consulate level or at the Brazilian immigration level, right? Like, consulate is when you're applying abroad, and Brazilian Federal Police is when you're applying like in the country. Like, there is a system that you're going to use for the application. And whenever we are applying, we're going to tell the business owner, congratulations, you are a business owner, but we're not going to deal with your business here. We don't want to see your articles of incorporation. We don't want to see your operating agreement. We don't want to see your, company tax. We don't want to see the bank statements for your business. That's not what we are showing to immigration. For the immigration, you are applying as an individual, and you are applying as an employee. That's the Brazilian mindset. And don't try to educate immigration. It doesn't work, right? I think common sense is going to tell you it doesn't work to try to educate immigration officers. You don't educate the immigration officers. You basically give what they are asking, okay? So since then, our track or our recommendation is going to be, listen, if you are the owner of the company, you're going to get like a letterhead from your own company, okay? It's going to be on your letterhead. You're going to have the description of whatever you can do remotely, and you can write this letter because guess what? You are the business owner, so it's not fake. You're not deceiving anyone. You're just presenting your relationship in a way that the Brazilian immigration is going to be able to match to their checklist. Okay, I think that's the bottom line. Many people imagine like the immigration officer, all right, like I'm going to explain to this guy how this thing works, and they're going to understand it. They're going to, feel pretty good about my application. That's not how it works. That is actually more like how Portuguese immigration works. For Portuguese immigration, yes, the immigration officers, particularly at the consulate level, they have a lot of discretion, and they are prone, in our experience, to actually try to understand that specific case in front of them, not the Brazilian one. The Brazilian one is pretty attached to checklists, that they have internally, okay? And therefore, for the business owner, again, going back, to the point here, you're gonna present yourself. That's in our experience, right? Like, I'm not saying like how the immigration is telling you to do. I'm saying how we advise our clients. You're gonna present yourself as an employee of the company. It does not matter if you are the owner. You're gonna present yourself like, and you don't need to say, well, John is an employee. Like, you just need to say, listen, John works for company ABC. He makes this amount of money. The activities that he is able to perform remotely are, I don't know, like, create websites, provide SEO requirements, publish the website, provide adjustments over time, check on Google Search Console to address like statistics over on a monthly basis and interact with the client as needed, right? And then this letter needs to be signed. Now, another point of attention, it needs to be signed by someone else, right? And this is a challenge to some people who are there, they just have like a business with themselves, okay? And now, if you ask me what to do, I'm gonna answer to you, I don't know, okay? Because if you sign for your own company, whenever the immigration officer looks at it, they get confused, right? This is a letter supposed to confirm that you are working remotely, and now you are signing on your behalf. It doesn't work, okay? So whenever people have this situation, I say, listen, you need to make a decision, and this decision is going to be on you. And what many people are going to do, and this is not what I'm recommending, I'm just sharing what we see being done, is like, even if it is a one-person company, they are going to talk, sometimes they have an accountant who works closely with them, or they have a partner who's going to sign on behalf of the entity. So as simple as that. Letter of, like remote work with the requirements that we have in our template, right? And then you need to hire our service to have those exact terms, because I don't even know all of them from the top of my head. It needs to be signed by someone else. As simple as that, all right? So again, forget about company paperwork, forget about articles of incorporation, forget about operating agreement, forget about anything about the company. They're just asking for a letter on the company's letterhead confirming that, yes, you work for that company on a remote basis, okay? And now maybe just, something else, because we spoke so much about this route on the financials. Let me be very clear. They couldn't care less about the financials for the entity. You are applying as a person. You're not applying as a company. The financials should show on your bank statement, okay? Never on the company's bank statement, because you are an individual. You're not a company applying for the digital nomad, all right? So I hope this is helpful, because this is a somewhat repetitive topic that we have in our consultations. I'm going to ask our team later on to probably just publish this piece for business owners. I'm not sharing everything, otherwise this is going to become just like digital nomad. But for people who are interested in this track and who are business owners, schedule a consultation with us. I think for this one, instead of picking the cheapest one, right, like the $75 one, you could, choose the ones that are higher end, which are typically with, senior attorneys here at the firm, and I am one of them, okay? And then I think you're gonna have, better feedback. Now, if you pick the cheapest one, you're gonna talk like with our, standard attorney. They are prepared to talk about those things in general, but they don't have as much knowledge as about companies, about how to present paperwork as a senior attorney would have. All right, so be reasonable and pick the right route. But yes, the digital nomad, as long as you present this application as an individual and you don't get caught up in the whole business ownership thing, yes, it works very well for business owners, and we don't have one, 10, we have dozens and dozens, if not hundreds. All right, so I hope that was helpful. Let's get back to another topic. All right, we have Michael. How long is the investor visa last for before someone can apply for citizenship? Michael, I'm gonna go straight with the answer. Your journey is gonna take you 8 years. All right, 8 years. So once you get, and by the way, there are two different routes, right? Like whenever you're talking about investment, there is investment in real estate, and then there is investment in a business. They have different timelines. For real estate, typically is going to be 4 years of temporary residency, and then an additional 4 years of permanent nature residence. And then in 8 years, right, plus whatever time you are spending on the applications and so on, that's when you would qualify for applying for the Brazilian citizenship if you are able to speak in Portuguese. Okay, that's on the real estate side. On the company side, that's very different. On the company side, typically you're gonna get the permanent nature residency, and once you have the permanent nature residency, you just need 4 years. Okay, so from a very simplified, listen, this is not gonna be for every single situation, but from a very simplified perspective, real estate 8 years, investment in a company 4 years. All right, Michael, there you go. So different tracks. They are both investor visas, but they are for different things, right? One is in real estate, another one is in business. General Principal, Feliz Quarta, Senhor Oliveira. Good to see you here, General Principal. Hope everything is well. The same with you. Could you explain not paying a vista at a store in the US has 8 pages of terms to sign for a payment plan, but is offered very casually in Brazil? Yeah, General Principal, and that's such an interesting aspect, because in the United States nowadays there are payment plans, right? Like, so nowadays you can buy an iPhone, you know, paying installments with Apple. If you're buying on Amazon, I don't know the name of the providers, but I know you can pay, like, it's like you pick, I think it's Karma, if I'm not mistaken, one of the providers. You're gonna pick that option, and then you could, you know, pay your purchase on Amazon in installments, right? But this is something extremely new, right? Like, I remember 10 years ago in the US, there was no option for you to buy anything on installments, and nowadays this is picking up, particularly because of financial technology firms kind of offering that as an option for consumers, right? But this, General Principal, it has been a reality that we have seen forever. Okay, so I do remember when I was, I don't know, 8 years old, or 7 years old. So we're talking here about the 70s, right? We're talking about the 70s in Brazil. We're talking about the 80s. And do you want to know how things would work? Like, you know, I remember my mom, like, she would buy something at the store, and you know, like, the store would say, listen, this thing costs like 200. 200, I think back then we would call the currency cruzeiros. It wasn't the same currency we have today. It was a different currency, Brazilian currency, but a different name for the currency. I think it was cruzeiros. I'm gonna write over here. All right, back in the 70s and 80s, cruzeiro, I think, was our Brazilian currency. All right. So going back to my story, in the 70s, in the 80s, like when my mom, like when I was with my mom at the shop, she would buy, and listen, Brazilians do buy in installments. That's just cultural. And it's also explained by our lower purchase power, right? So US citizens or US nationals or Canadians, or I don't know, like potentially Europeans, like, people from the UK, I don't know, maybe France, Spain, they don't need to buy on credit. Brazilians, we do need to buy on credit. So I remember very clearly my mom, we would go to a mall and then she would want to buy something for 200 cruzeiros, not reais, not rios. That's nowadays currency. Back then it was cruzeiro. And the way she would pay, because there was no credit card, there was no electronic means of payment, right? It would be check based, right? So if she would buy something for 200 cruzeiros, she would basically write 4 checks of 50 cruzeiros each check, and then she would handle the checks to the cashier, and the cashier would give a thumbs up. All right, now I got the 200 cruzeiros, even though it's like 4 checks for 50 cruzeiros. Typically, each check would be payable on a monthly basis. So, many times the first check would be payable right away, and the other checks, they would be payable on a monthly basis. Okay, but this has been our reality, general principle, since from, I don't know, forever, right? At least since as long I was a child, okay? Which means a long, long time ago, but such an interesting an interesting take. And maybe just to bring this thing to, nowadays, general principle, because this thing is so ingrained in our culture, society, and guess what? We've been doing that for so long. Very easy for you to do that whenever you are buying stuff. Typically they can help you pay installments at the cashier, right? So you don't even need to tell the if there is a salesperson, like typically you get to the cashier, say, you know what, I want to pay this thing like in 6 installments, right? Many times, Brazilian credit cards nowadays, every single Brazilian credit card, which is another major distinction, right? General principle, every single credit card in Brazil allows you to pay installments, is a feature that's going to be in every single Brazilian credit card. You can pay installments. Not like if you have a US credit card, typically you cannot. Like there is no default installment plan feature into this credit card. Like if you're using a traditional American Express card, guess what? You need to pay that bill every single month. If you don't pay the bill, they're going to hit you with interest and so on. But in Brazil, if you're using a Brazilian credit card, and you go to a store that says we're selling this stuff like in 10 installments with no interest, they are going to ring your card in a way that you're going to be able to pay on a monthly basis with no interest, because that was the deal, okay? So such an interesting question, general principle. Yeah, it does remind me of the 70s and the 80s. When like paying installments would require a bunch of physical checks for that to be accomplished. Michael, when purchasing real estate in Brazil, do an individual find the property first, then hire you guys? I ask this question because in purchasing real estate, you need to make a deposit. Michael, I'm going to tell you how it should work and how it works in real life, right? Now, in my opinion, okay, people should hire us before shopping for the real estate, because let's say if you have a short list of 3 properties, right? Like we can vet those properties and let you know which of those properties are going to work for the purpose of the investor visa. And that would be my recommendation, because not sure if you know, we have a service that we call A to Z, in which we pretty much handle everything, right? Like from the first need you have as a buyer to the actual visa or residency being issued, right? Like, so it's a long term like relationship. Typically it takes at least 9 months. I like to say is like having a baby together. It's a lot of work, right? We have here a study in which we know that we handle, like from beginning to end, about 200 to 300 activities on your behalf. And in terms of communication with the realtor, communication with the banks, communication with immigration. It could be, I don't know, 1,000 conversations. So it's a massive service that we provide. And like in my understanding, if you hire us before finding the property, it makes it easier for you for your shopping of the property, right? Now, this is what I would recommend. What I see happening is like people go out there, they find something, they marry with the property in their heads. They don't make an offer, right? Like, I mean, typically they just find the property, they get in touch with the realtor, but they don't commit, because if you commit, if you sign the sinal, if you sign anything, there is no going back. I mean, there is no nothing we can do to have your transaction qualifying for the investor visa, right? So my recommendation is hire before. Now, in my experience, guess what? Most of our clients, they are first going to find a property, and then before, pushing the button, meaning, make an offer in writing or, signing the purchase agreement, that's when they are going to hire us, right? And it's very important that you never sign anything. Some realtors, they may present the purchase agreement as just like a deposit. It's never a deposit. Let me be very crystal clear. Whenever you're signing something in Brazil, it's never a deposit. It is the whole purchase agreement, meaning that if you walk back later, right? Let's say you because of your misunderstanding, you happen to sign a deposit or sinal agreement, and then we take a look at the property and say, listen, Michael, you know what? Like, this property is not going to qualify. There is this problem. There is this concern with the seller of the property, or the property is rural, or the property has liens, or whatever. After you sign the purchase agreement, there is no going back. Like, what you will need to do in that circumstance is actually to give up your sinal, because you are the one changing minds, right? And it doesn't matter, well, I hired an attorney and they said that this property is bad. That's your problem, because you signed that agreement, and the agreement signed, right? So just because you hired an attorney and now the attorney tells you that that's a bad deal, it doesn't give you a way out because of that. So the idea here is that you never sign anything before you have an attorney reviewing the paperwork, and preferably an attorney with a good reputation, someone you can trust, someone you can assess prior relationships with other clients, right? Because we have a litigation case here. We have a bunch of real estate litigation cases coming from people who went by themselves to buy stuff with just a realtor, right? We have a bunch of cases here at the firm. And a recent one is a person who bought a property. It was a rural property, and this person didn't have any residency at all. And for you to buy rural property in Brazil, you should have a residency, and ideally a residency of permanent nature. Okay, so now, they are entangled with the seller because they paid a large chunk of the property. Another very bad thing for you to do, right? Even before the closing. Now, of course, the seller is not going to return the money. They're assessing, how viable it is for them to acquire title, since they are not residents. And as you may imagine, it's just like a nightmare. And guess what? To save some bucks on an attorney, they hired someone locally. He was an attorney. And we found out, believe it or not, that this person was not a real attorney, was a student, like a law student, who was performing as a lawyer. And naturally, this person never knew that you need to be a resident to buy rural properties. And now they are in a nightmare, right? And then, it is a couple, they have family. You know how this goes, right? It's not just like a financial stress. It becomes like a family problem. I don't know if it did or not, but in my head, it may strain the couple's relationship. So there is so much that could go wrong. As a percentage of the transactions, it does go wrong. Okay, it does go wrong, and that's why we have a bunch of real estate litigation cases here at the firm. All right, let's see what else. Has your firm completed a full 4-year journey for a business investor visa yet? No, Aaron, we have not. We have a few ones like in the works, but we haven't completed one. Okay, as you probably know, is not our preferred pathway. Is just like a bad choice to most people, and therefore we are not really big into this business investor visa. Now you're probably asking that because I can foretell your next questions is going to be, listen, how often do they evaluate the business? Like, do they really check down the line if the business is alive or not? And I can tell you there is a bunch of people who come to us to pursue the real estate investor visa after a botched company investor visa. Okay, and we have clients like who went through the whole thing because they got into this amazing company investor visa. It didn't work, partnership fell apart, they lost their money, and then they said, yeah, bad decision, now let's do the right thing and invest into the business, into the real estate route. Much simpler, much more solid. And after you buy the correct way, after you secure your residency, the only thing you need to worry is about keeping the title on your name and nothing else, right? You can rent it out, you can use the property, you can keep it vacant. Nobody cares, okay? Nobody cares as long as you remain the owner in the title, right? So pretty simple. Right now, the company visa is a completely different, animal, and there is so much room for failure, right? Like from so many different perspectives. Major one for me is like labor legislation. You need to create like employment positions, and you as a foreign citizen, you are a target. You're gonna be a target for bad faith employees to sue you, right? Like they could work with you for a couple of years. When you decided to let them go, they take the money, like that you're paying for the termination of the employment, and then they sue you for more. Okay, and it's just like very sad, and that's just one of the concerns, right? I mean, in the U.S., like, what is the chance of a new business to succeed? Low, right? Most new business, they will not succeed. Now you come into Brazil, and not talking about you, Aaron, I'm talking in general, right? Like you are an European, you are, I don't know, like an Asian, you are someone from the US. Now you come into Brazil and you want to succeed in business. Very bold, I'm going to grant. Now for you to link that to your immigration, just a bad idea. Okay, that's my take on it. All right, guys, it's we are arriving at the end of our live stream. So many interesting questions today. I want to say thank you. Without such participation, our live stream would be just boring. Okay, so I want to say thank you to all of you who participated in the live stream today. Our next one is going to be next Wednesday, so we're talking about 7 days from now. That should be August the 26th, 12:30 Rio de Janeiro time. I have made sure that we have like this live stream created on YouTube. So if you come like to the schedule live streams, like on the live tab, you're gonna see the streaming for the 26th. You can click on notify me, and by doing so, you're gonna be notified whenever the live stream is starting, and that's gonna help you, meet with us. If you did like our live stream, I ask you to please click the like button, and if you're not a subscriber, consider subscribing as well. And wishing you all a blessed rest of